Hello, everyone. Welcome to Love Alchemy podcast, the place where we discuss everything related to navigating sometimes challenging human experiences, especially relationships, dating, living with purpose. And today, specifically, we are discussing it's episode number 2, and we're discussing human suffering, how to reduce or release human suffering. Is it possible? And I am with a very special guest. He's my friend, and so maybe he'll introduce himself. How about you introduce yourself, Dima? Yeah?
Hey guys. Yeah, I'm not a big big fan of complicated introductions, right? Because quite often we kind of try to establish all our fancy credentials. I'll just say that I'm a human being and I've been around for some time and I have experienced a lot of different emotions and life circumstances and challenges and everything, right? And I'm happy to share my perspectives and opinions on that. And when we were chatting with Alona about this interview, right, I was resisting this a little bit because I think that a lot of what you will hear me say will probably feel useless or even triggering to you, maybe. Who knows, right? But we will see. I'm always excited to have an interesting conversation. We've had many conversations with Alona over the years about relationships and life and many other interesting topics. So I'm looking forward to now having this in public, if you will.
Yes, definitely. When we have a conversation, it often goes into some let's say like mind expanding topics, and sometimes can be triggering even like for us, because I feel like we come from different perspectives but almost always go into similar conclusions. But actually, before we dive in, I also want to introduce you from the perspective of how people may know you.
Sure.
And I know that people may know you as a grandfather of Ethereum, and also as a multi million-dollar businesses you used to run, and also like from the perspective that I know you, I think you are a consciousness explorer. And as you said, yeah, you're like a human being, you but also like specifically love energy in human being. Do you resonate with that? Like, do you want to add something to this?
Sure. I mean, there are so many perspectives we can take on the human, right? Like, some people know me as Vitalik's father, Vitalik, creator of Ethereum. Some people know me as the owner of a beautiful cat that I post on Instagram or whatever, right? Like, so many different perspectives.
So true, so true. Okay, so let's dive in right away into the topic that this podcast is mostly about, and it's about relationships, because that's kind of the most interesting topics for me these days. I'm a wellness and relationship coach, and what's your perspective? Why relationships seem to be so complicated these days, more than ever before, or at least it seems like that, and seems like they bring the most suffering in us.
Well, humans are infinitely complicated, and we all have a certain story about ourselves and about other people. And that story is always a big simplification, right? And the way I think about this is in relationships, we humans, especially as we get closer to each other, we inevitably end up pushing each other buttons, right? And as humans, we carry all the impressions, all the things that happen to us throughout our lives, right? And human beings, and I think animals, all kinds of other animals as well, safety is and the desire to self-preserve, right, is really critical to us, and because of that, all of their, let's say, painful experiences, they are prioritized very high in our psyche, right? And because of that, we react to things that scare us much more strongly than to things that excite us and so on, right? So because of that, well, I mean, that's kind of contributing factor to the fact that in relationships, inevitably, the other person being infinitely complex the way they are, they end up without knowing that they do that, but they push our buttons and they trigger the things that we carry in ourselves, all our fears, our reactive patterns, and so on.
Mm-hmm. So what I hear you saying that relationships actually are not really for the purpose of being just really comfortable and just experiencing this like love and joy, but one of the main points of relationship is actually to push those buttons and kind of encourage us to evolve more, like and expand more.
I would say this, every human being, or most human beings, we have this primary subconscious desire to find permanent peace and comfort. And we also consciously try to find that in different ways through relationships, achievements, sex, experiences, money, children, family, so many other things, right? And so that's the subconscious desire. And we constantly, and most relationships, right? We kind of seek, we hope that we will find that person who will become that magical solution to our discomfort. And they will, by us having them, we will finally feel comfortable and at peace and we'll feel in love and loved and so on. And we might for some time, we will, I'm sure, right? But inevitably, the other side of this is that they will also trigger us. And if we expect them to be that source of constant peace and love for us, we will end up being disappointed because sometimes they will also be angry at us or whatever. They will carry, they will have some emotions that will trigger us. And we will struggle with that and we will end up blaming them because, well, you should not be this way, like I found you to be this for me, right? But they are not there for you. So I think that's most of the time it's really just like the stuck loop of expectations from each other and blaming each other. You should be different. No, you should be different, right? And sometimes, very rarely, but things can end up being different when we no longer expect things from the other person. And we know that all kinds of emotions will come up in ourselves, but you know what? We can still share with them our own joy and love and peace and all of that. So,
Yeah, it's like taking away from that from them that responsibility of being that only source of love and joy, as you said. Um, how I see relationships sometimes it's like we like as you said in the beginning especially it's so fun and the heart is opening and we're experiencing so much love that it feels like oh my god yeah it's that's what I was looking for and now it seems like all suffering is gone but you, as you said also it's usually pretty temporary and we keep looking for that again initial spark and that feeling of love that really directs us to that for me like when I kind of start digging into those feelings I understand that what I'm actually looking for or um, longing for is that connection like with love itself and with the divine and to me like what I realized it comes down to that initial separation or the illusion of separation from the divine and that's like the wound of separation I feel like that's like we constantly trying to fill it up with connections especially when we find that romantic connection with other it feels like that original love where we came from but really it's always there but we forget about it and we trying to find like pieces of it in another human.
yeah, that's a good metaphor, definitely. That's exactly what I was talking about when I say that we humans constantly feel this internal subconscious discomfort, and we don't might not even realize that, right? But that's the original discomfort of the feeling separate. I'm this,
Mhm.
and the world is that, and I want it to be this, and give me this permanence, and it's not to be found.
Yes, yes. It's also like reminds me, I think maybe Gabor Mate said that safety, and you actually touched on safety a lot, right? So safety is not an absence of danger, but it's actually presence of meaningful connection. and like we are wired like that. That's why the disconnection feels like huge danger.
Yeah, and we're talking about this different phases in relationships, right? And initially there's this, if you will, romantic infatuation, right? And then later on we might hit some bumps and end up with like pressing each other buttons and potentially blaming each other and trying to fix each other, change each other. In that process, we might either get stuck in this blame, like, oh, well, you're this way and you're attacking me, or you're doing this, whatever, you're doing something against me, or we might end up actually opening up more. And if we do, even if that does happen, that's really the magic when we are able to build more connection, more intimacy through more vulnerability. The more we can see our own helplessness, our own instability, our own weaknesses, if you will, the more connection is happening there magically.
Yes, and do you find that men and women tend to react differently to these conflicts? Like from my experience, for example, women, if we have feel like we're in conflict, we want to connect more. We want to kind of like fix by connecting, and men usually try to do the opposite, like disconnect and take their time and kind of, restructure maybe themselves.
I've come across that and I've seen that in my own relationships, right? But I don't think there is any universal categorization of this kind of stuff. Like it really depends on this particular situation, this particular relationship, and it might end up being different. Like I've seen also the opposite, right? So, and end of the day, right? It's not like you can find some rules and you can say, hey, because it's this, then I should do this and blah, 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 and then I will be happy. No, the life will tell you like, fuck you, like here's the situation in front of you, right? And this is it. And you deal with what the situation is, not like with your story about how it could be or should be, or man this, women that.
Right, right. But even hormonally, we're different, right? So women, because we're based more on estrogen and oxytocin, we're wired more for connection, and men based more on testosterone, and that sometimes leads to that separation as a solution. That's how I
Maybe,
understand.
right? But these are all concepts, right? And in a particular moment, this male might actually be more open and connected, and this particular female in this particular moment might actually be more disconnected or aggressive or scared or whatever it is, right? So
Mhm.
that's kind of what I'm saying.
For
Yeah.
sure, for sure. And we, of course, we all have masculine and feminine energies within us.
Yeah.
Do you see the world like this, or you never really look from the perspective of masculine, feminine, yin and
I
yang?
don't. Yeah, I see the world as very simple, really. It's just all pure magic. So
Or pure magic, you said?
yes.
Mm-hmm.
Right. Because again, like and my brain is very analytical, so it used to have all these complicated stories and like trying to figure it out. And eventually the the final insight was, if you will, that all of the insights are bullshit, and all those complications and complex theories and stories, they don't really, I mean, they are fun, but again, like this is your current moment. What you feel right now is all that you have, always ever.
Absolutely. And what I find, like, yeah, if I'm actually willing to feel what's in the moment and like just be with it, eventually it all becomes joy. It all opens up into love. But sometimes it takes like enormous courage to actually face the moment as it is. And like,
Sometimes it's impossible, right? And we end up escaping and avoiding and doing all kinds of other stuff, of course.
mm-hmm,
So it's
mm-hmm.
always already that.
So you seems like you found that way that going from the head, from the thoughts into the body, but that's usually kind of make
Yeah,
brings
no, I
the
haven't
relief.
found that way. It's more like I realized that there was never that way. It's always just like, here's my human, animal, human being, and sometimes it's doing this, and sometimes it's doing that, and this is it.
So you don't have a solution. For me, I always try to find, okay, if I found something that made me feel better, I kind of it just my brain works on it. I was like, okay, now I want to remember how I did it and then
Of course.
remember it for myself and then share it with others as a
Yeah,
tool,
of
right?
course.
So, and for me, like, yeah, going into my body and feeling the body, feeling the emotion is definitely like the biggest tool I use
Yeah,
right now,
yeah,
and I love sharing with others because,
for
yeah,
sure.
as you
No,
said,
it's
it's
very
not about
powerful,
the
right? And
stories.
through even simple things like breathing exercises or meditation exercises or whatever it is, right? Like they quite often can help us feel better in a particular moment, and sometimes they cannot.
Hmm. So, can you share like the most profound tools for you? Of course, at different stage of life, maybe it was different. I know, like you know, your exploration was like psychedelics, especially. So, if you want to share like something that made the best or the most impact on you.
Yeah, I would say that the most profound insight was that there are no insights and no tools, but like when this whole idea of finding impactful tools and approaches it was lost, it kind of became simpler, meaning that recently I was in Mexico and it was the weather is beautiful, the scenery is beautiful, and on all of that, and it's warm. And I came back to Toronto, and then we had tons of snow and whatever. And you know what? Snow is beautiful too, right? So there is a enjoyment possibly in every moment. And I was dealing with some medical issues, and I had a lot of pain, and the pain was there, right? So it's like this inescapable flow of things. So. Um, I no longer, how to put this, I no longer believe that I can give anybody an advice. Oh, this is a tool that can help because I really have no fucking clue, right? They are in this particular situation, they are this particular
Hmm.
human. And there are many different tools that they can try. And yeah, you mentioned psychedelics. I tried them first for the first time when I was 42, so more than 10 years ago. And they are the most profound and powerful tool the mental health industry found to help people uh, make some changes, if you will, in their psychology long term and deal with addictions and trauma and other stuff. But they can be very difficult, very intense. So it's not like I can uh, give advice to anybody, hey, you should do that. You know what? They are out there and they are powerful and they are intense and they can be very scary and difficult. And so yeah, that's like, if anybody is interested in that, then they can explore that, right? But I know many people who are very scared even to try. I know some people who tried a bit, and it was a pretty difficult experience for them even when they tried a bit and they stopped. And I cannot say that they should be different because they are the only person who knows what's the best path for them.
Yes,
Like,
yes, I agree.
I used
Hmm.
to be judgmental and think that things like antidepressants, like SSRIs, right, are bad. People should not take them. But you know what? I no longer believe that because I know that sometimes I've seen people who've been helped with that. I know some people who've been stuck with them for decades. I know some people who've used them for a bit and it helped them to move forward, and now they use different tools. So yeah, there are many different tools, and nobody knows what's the best for you, right? Like, your heart knows,
Hmm.
and then you can try, and then you can see if it helps you or not. And it reminds me, like maybe 7, 8 years ago, I did this really cool meditation course, and it was over a course of 120 days, so 4 months. They were taking us through many, many, many different meditation techniques, and it was done online in the setting of a small group. We would do exercises individually, but then every weekend we would have a video call and discuss our experiences. And they would take us through many, many different meditation techniques. And it was fascinating to see how different meditation techniques different people would react differently to them. Somebody would feel no effect, somebody would feel peaceful and joyful, somebody would be agitated and anxious. And it was very obvious that, again, it's not like there is the best kind of meditation that will be applicable, right? But it's more like many different tools. Try them and see. And really, this is how we live our lives, right? We're all monkeys and we learn from other monkeys around us. And we try, and sometimes we find that it works for us, sometimes it doesn't.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure. I agree that everyone needs something different and at every moment, for sure. But I'm also curious, we probably talked about it before, but I can't recall like what was that initial spark that kind of brought you from, so you were like a tech guy, very linear thinker for many years, and then you just did like, how did it happen that you decide to really explore emotions, psychedelics, or maybe it always was present, just
Yeah, I would
somewhere.
say that actually, if you know somebody for a long time, you can see that they have some foundational energies, if you will, that they're like, it's more common for them to be in a certain emotion, in a certain state, to behave in a certain way. We all have that. I can see that in my kids and so on, right? So for me, for example, one of their core energies in me as a human, it's always been curiosity, right? And when I was a child, then it was curiosity about which then manifests itself in trying to learn. I read so many books and I was interested in science and all of this. And then I ended up being an accidental entrepreneur in my 20s, and then I got really into entrepreneurship and how do you build a business, and then businesses, oh wow, they are not just about, and it was specifically tech businesses, right? And as a guy who was interested in technology, there was a big discovery for me that the success of a business is not just about, it's mostly not about your complex technical product, but it's about human beings. How do you help them find a solution to their problem, right? So through that, I
Mm-hmm.
got interested in psychology and human motivation
Oh.
and things like Tony Robbins and a whole bunch of other related like speakers on that topic. And then through that, I ended up interested in things like meditation and Buddhism and whatnot. And I came across this guy, Sam Harris. I don't know if you know the name.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, yeah,
I read his book, Waking Up, and the
yeah.
subtitle of this book is Spirituality Without Religion. And I read his book, and it was quite powerful for me because he was a smart guy speaking kind of my language, if you will. But then
Mm-hmm.
his book was very much about many different aspects of life that I have not thought about. And it kind of like started me on my journey of exploring psychedelics and many other things also. So yeah, I explored that. I meditated for many years, quite a bit. So yeah, like, yeah, my curiosity was just expressing itself in many different ways.
Mm-hmm. I want to ask about your company. So you had company Wild Apricot, and what I realized, like you told me that actually you experimented there with a different structure. So going from like hierarchical structure, more like, again, I would call it more masculine, but we don't need to use that word, but to more feminine, like decentralized. And when did it start? Was it brought in you by, meditation and like wanting to bring more of those like everybody's best talents or best energies? Like how did you start that?
Yeah, good question. I think that like people, we have this foundational difference. A lot of people, they grow up with a very strong program of listening to authority, following the authority, and submitting to authority, right? And for example, in their ex-Soviet bloc, that was very, very common. And then for some reason, in other places, or again in the Soviet Union, some people end up with a very, very psychology of um, humans are equal, not believing in hierarchy and authority and stuff like that, right? So that was always also very foundational in me. I was never really somehow the environment, never, and I was fortunate not to be pushed into that program of like authority is the God that I have to submit to. So that was like very foundational to this. But and then my curiosity, I was reading a lot, and eventually I read one book specifically about this. It was called Reinventing Organizations, I think, or something like that, by guy in Europe, Frederick Laloux, I think his name. Anyways, I read the book and it resonated with me a lot. And then I shared it with like my key partner in the business and resonated with him a lot because, we were very similar, I guess, in some of our thinking about humans. And we decided to try it out. And um, And it was a very painful process to implement that. It took us a long time. We didn't realize how much chaos and resistance there would be because, again, we humans, we want the freedom, but it's kind of like, with freedom, there the side of freedom responsibility, right? That's really kind of the
Mm-hmm.
case. Kind of, what is your choice? And it's not really your choice, but somehow some humans, they are more attracted toward like trying to submit into authority and hoping to find the safety by that imaginary wonderful authority of the president, God, or whatever the fuck taking care of you. And some people are more attracted to being more like, give me my freedom and my decisions. And with that, I will have to be fully responsible for their outcomes of those decisions. There's really nobody to blame. So we implemented that. Took us a while, and but eventually we saw a lot of really strong outcomes. The way it kind of unleashed helped people in our organization. We were about whatever 120 people or something like that. That really I saw a lot more resilience and creativity and motivation and so on. So it worked nicely for a while, but soon after that, we sold the company and it was bought by a big corporate entity who very quickly kind of squashed that. Like, we don't need this stuff. We just want more profitability. So
Oh my God. So they brought it back to the hierarchical
course, of
structure
course.
after
Yeah,
that?
yeah. They
Oh my
really
God.
crushed it. And it's funny, like, I think that what we have created over the years was still very resilient and kind of helped them maintain the business. Because I think that quite often when there's all of this heavy-handed hierarchical management, you know what, the business, especially if you have to be creative, if you're building software, if you whatever, like, people don't, if you're building if you dig in earth, then maybe hierarchical structure is efficient because you just force people to do or whatever.
Mhm.
But if you're building something complex and creative, like building software or whatever, then that doesn't really work that well because smart people in general, they don't kind of like that kind of approach. They're not fully open their potential in that environment.
This is so cool. Well, first of all, I can relate to actually being from, yeah, Soviet Union. I feel like in us who actually immigrated from there, we have that like rebellion in us against that kind of hierarchy and authority as well.
Right.
So, yeah, but I also agree on that creativity without structure is impossible for me, like because I understand everything from like tantric perspective and those masculine and feminine energies, and for me like the structure and flow cannot exist without each other, right? If we want creativity, productivity, that it has to be structure in which people then can uh, be free to create, but the structure doesn't have to be like that very rigid,
It's a
right?
very interesting topic, right? Because reminds me, I think it was Stephen King who wrote about this, that, it's not like he's obviously one of very creative humans out there, right? Like he wrote so many books and whatnot. And he wrote that he's creative, but it's not like he wakes up and he just does whatever. He has his routines, and he every day he tries to write. He does that, and he does this. And also reminds me, I think the name of the lady, it's called Julie Cameron. Cameron, if I'm not mistaken, from New York. She was writing some workshops, ended up writing a book about, I forgot the title of the book, but it's about fostering creativity. And it's interesting that a lot of their recommendations on the book, they're really about some disciplines, so they're not about like, hey, just do whatever and be creative, but it's about the discipline, right? And that kind of brings me to overall thinking this very interesting balance in every human of our ability to be disciplined and to surrender, to be sensitive and to be disciplined. Because I think that in most humans, it's kind of one or the other. And I think that it's a struggle then because discipline is our ability to, if you will, mm, deal with some pain with their expectation that it will bring us some future result, right? and surrender is our sensitivity to this very moment and being totally, absolutely responsive to this particular moment and constantly flowing with the moment. And it's not like one is there is a magical answer. Sometimes you will be totally responsive, and then you will end up realizing that, like, oh, but without my disciplines, I have not been able to, I don't know, manage my finances and do this and that, right? Manage my environment in terms of how I organize things, how to clean up and whatnot, right? And the flip
Mm-hmm.
side, like, being very disciplined, which was a strong characteristic of mine, programmed into me from a young age. It was very powerful and helped me achieve a lot, but also it was very painful for people around me because I was all about, oh, I have to be this way, I have to be productive. And then I expected everybody else to be this way. And I wasn't sensitive to how I was feeling. Like, if I'm sick or whatever, like, I just have to do this, right? And I was not sensitive to how they were feeling, right? So, like, and I was just expecting them to follow the same program that existed in me, right? And eventually, now it's kind of very obvious that uh, sometimes things unfold in this way, sometimes they unfold in that way, and neither one is a perfect answer because life is infinitely complex.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. What's your discipline now? I'm curious, or not so much discipline, but maybe like a routine that works for you.
Well, I have a whole bunch of things, right? Like, ever since I was like a teenager, I always loved crossing things off, like done, done, done,
Mhm.
having to do lists and whatever. And over the years, I have developed a lot of very complicated organizing systems, which were also, I really needed them because balancing, or, dealing with business and then having kids and some other aspects of my life. Kind of trying to do that. And my life now is much less complicated because I'm retired, so I don't have a business I have to run. And the kids are teenagers, they don't need that much help or whatever. But I still, just because naturally, or, at least since a long time, those disciplines they were programmed into me, and my human being finds comfort in them. Like, I have a checklist every day where, like, okay, I do this, I do that, I do those exercises, I do whatever, take some supplements and so on. So again, it's much simpler than that, but still just like a basic foundational routine, and I find comfort in that.
Mm-hmm. And where do you find purpose these days? Because if you had business, okay, there's a specific goal you go to. How is it for you now? Is it important at all, or like
No, no, the
no?
idea of business is totally silly for me.
No, the purpose, the idea of
The
purpose
purpose,
is
sorry, yeah. The
okay.
idea of purpose, yeah. It's gone.
It's
Totally
gone.
purposeless life.
Experiencing life in every moment. Yeah.
Yeah, and that's what we always do, right? And can I think of a purpose again? It's one of the ways of seeking. We hope that, and some people tell us, well, you know what? If you find a strong purpose and blah, 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 then you will finally be peaceful and strong. And, but you know what? You're human, and sometimes you will be sad, sometimes you will be angry, sometimes you will be disappointed, sometimes you will be demotivated and helpless and all of that. And again, like, if you think that some idea of some purpose uh, will help you through that, you will be struggling and suffering because life constantly changes, right? And maybe right now you have a close friend or your significant other and they are struggling and suffering, right? And you're like, not that. My purpose is changing the world, fixing the world, right? So, like, but you know what? Maybe the best way to fix the world right now is to give the person who's in front of you, to give them a hug, to support them, right? And cry with them or whatever the fuck, right? So
Mhm.
like, again, like, purpose is a very mental idea, and our brains are very powerful and it's all beautiful, but that's only a small part of our general infinite nature, if you will.
Mm-hmm. But what I hear is your actual like purpose is very connected to the heart, like the heart being the leader. So yes, if it's the friend who needs help, or if it's something else you can help with somebody, or I think you also help in like Ukraine, and like, so you do find purpose, but you follow your heart. You don't follow like the mental concept. That's what I understand.
Yeah, it's if you will, it's kind of I I now much more open to my own randomness, and I can feel differently in different moments in time. And sometimes I can support the person close to me who is suffering. Sometimes I close off and run away. I cannot do that or whatever. And it reminds me, like recently, I wrote a social media post about some of my life experiences and then kind of connected that to my support for Ukraine. And that social media post on Twitter became very popular, got like thousands of likes, and then a lot of people commented, right? And some people were supportive, and then some people who had different perspective, and some bots probably they were very insulting and angry. And you know what? I had fun. I replied, I think, to pretty much every comment, and there were like hundreds of comments. And somebody would be insulting to me. I might insult them back and swear back at them, or I might just like smile and send them my hugs, or I might dialogue with them, right? So like it was all very random. And again, like so I have curiosity. I have my uh, preference to being kind of more free versus like in the hierarchical authority structure, and also like to be silly. So
Hmm. Hmm. Okay. Well, then let's go into a bit more spicy topic then. I mean, that was pretty spicy too, but I also wanted to ask your opinion on some uh, ways of relating. You know how there are different structures of relationships now. There's like monogamous, there's marriages, and there are also those polyamorous, open relationships.
right.
And yeah, it can be a triggering topic for many people. So I'm curious your perspective, especially as I see you like kind of like healthy, mature, masculine perspective on topic of polyamorous relationship, like why people look for polyamory, and yeah, what do you
Mm,
think?
I think it's our very complex and paradoxical human nature. On the one hand, we hope to find in the other person that permanent source of love and support and peacefulness and so on. And quite often we don't. And then we have our human nature that drives us, and we attract it. And and media knows how to push our buttons, with all of those beautiful imagery and whatnot. So we have our natural human hormonal nature, and then we're kind of trying to take this paradox, and then we try to put it in a particular box. Like, you know what? Okay, here's this paradox, but it's good to be monogamous. Let's do that, right? Or you can say like, hey, it's good to be polyamorous, and this is how it is. And my answer is like, there's no answer in a particular relationship. People will figure out what is the right approach for them, and they might have again their different mental models, but then they will end up seeing that life is actually different. And have some people who are quite some friends who I can see who are quite happy in monogamous relationships. I know people who are quite unhappy in monogamous relationship, right? I know people who have seemingly made it work in polyamorous relationships, and I know people who convince themselves that polyamorous relationship is the way for them to go, but then I can see how much suffering in them. So like I would say that there's no right or wrong approach, but it's about two humans navigating like, what is their right for them in this particular moment, and then how can we throw vulnerability then if we feel threatened, if we feel scared, if like, how do we navigate that, right? And I think we discussed with you in the past this nonviolent communication.
Hmm.
So for me, that's one of really good frameworks and metaphors for how do we uh, talk through this complex and triggering, scary topics with another human. And it's really about how can we share ourselves without like saying that I feel scared, but then without blaming them, well, you shouldn't have put up that picture of yourself out there on social media because whatever, right? Like, you're doing this and it hurts me. Well, they did it, but they didn't do that to hurt you, right? They did it for some reasons, and who knows, right? But if we feel scared and threatened and insecure and whatnot, how can we share that what we feel without blaming them, right? Because if we blame somebody, if we angry and we try to fix them through anger, because really anger is our attempt to affect our emotions. Like I feel scared, and now I want to change you so that to get rid of my fear, right? But it doesn't really work, right? The more we can connect with that fear and vulnerability and share, I find that as humans, we are much more likely to, if you ask me to do something for you, and if you try to force me to do this, personally, I'm much less likely to do that versus if you share with me that your struggle, your pain, your suffering, and so on, then I'm much more inclined uh, to do whatever I can to support you just because I want to, right? Like, end of the day, I think in humans, it's we have that foundational compassion, and we have all kinds of other stuff, and anger and fear and cruelty, all of that. But also compassion is right there as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Seems like it comes down to really taking responsibility for your own emotions, for your own feelings without blame, like owning them, and then just communicate to the other from that perspective.
You
Um,
know what? And it's actually even deeper than that, right? Because the idea of taking responsibility is, for me, is still the idea of control. But when you clearly see that there's no control and the emotions sometimes are there, and then you can share them, then there is so much more compassion found in that. Because when you can see your own helplessness not to feel a certain emotion, then and not to be sometimes reactive to that emotion, then also you feel so much empathy and compassion for other human beings because you see, what, they're just as helpless as you are. And it doesn't mean that then you're like, oh yeah, okay, it's like it's okay for you to attack me with a knife because I sometimes also want to kill everybody. No, if they attack you with a knife, you can still protect yourself. You can deal with that situation, right? But you don't need the judgment that this is a bad person attacking me. It's a natural reaction, but without the judgment, if you will.
Mm-hmm. Well, for me, how I understand that, and that's why I say take responsibility. For me, responsibility, when I take responsibility, it means I'm connecting to my own power. And for me, it's a big difference, power and control, because control usually comes, yes, from fear, and then you're trying to change the other so you actually feel better. Which responsibility it's kind of like you holding yourself, you holding your own emotions, and we have to be able hold ourselves.
And sometimes we can't. That's really
Yes.
what I'm saying, right? Because again, that's a mental idea. We have to be able, but sometimes we can't. And when you
Mm-hmm.
really see that, there is so much compassion in that, right? And that power that you're talking about, again, like, it's this idea of self that is trying to control things, but there's actually infinite power of the universe, but there's no control over that power. It's there, right? And if it's doing what it's doing that for some very powerful reasons, right? So,
Mm-hmm. But how I see it, it's more like it's not, again, controlling, it's like holding yourself in that. It's almost like a mother holding the child. So, and you kind of like hold yourself in that, even if it's like the huge emotional waves, but you hold yourself there, not controlling. And that you can do to yourself. Maybe sometimes you can't, as you said, like it can be too overwhelming, but you cannot expect the other do it
I
for you.
can guarantee you, you have seen yourself being an asshole to other people, right? Because you were reactive, you were scared, and then you lashed out, or you disconnected and ran away, or you insulted somebody. So yeah, whatever story you tell yourself that you should do or you should not do, sometimes you cannot. And that's really the truth of how life is.
Mm-hmm.
There's so much. as I already said, love and compassion in that recognition.
Love and compassion is the must, and yeah, for yourself first, of course, as you said. Um, for me, it's like awareness, and like, yeah, even watching yourself. Like, yeah, sometimes you can be an asshole, but you like, okay, you observe yourself being an asshole, and it's like, okay, I'm an asshole now. Uh, and I think that's like a very important step in a human evolution too. I feel like it's understand that we cannot be like all those like heroic selves all the time and be like really honest, like what's actually happening in our psychics and our like the inner drives and those fears that like produce like some judgment in us or some criticism or some what we would call like some negative stuff. Just like, yeah, it's a normal human experience, and that awareness is the first step of like just giving space to it. Yeah, it's not always we can just like change it, but at least being aware of that in us, and that brings that compassion towards others. So, and you see how everything works like a mirror kind of in that sense.
Mhm. Yeah, it's
Hmm.
all an infinite hall of mirrors for sure. How the people reflect us and we reflect, them and so on. It's just all mirrors.
Hmm. So yeah, I love this. And it's not just idea; it is. But some people don't really resonate with it. So do you believe that the world around you is a reflection of what you are inside in every moment? How do you see that?
Yeah, I think that the ideas of the world and they just ideas generated by the brain. So the universe just like generates all those different representations and different, human beings. So this is how the world is. This is how it should be. This is what's good and bad. And this is my relationship to the world. But they're all one unity, if you will. So.
So we just have different filters from interpreting the flow of life that always there.
Yeah, like I look outside of my window and I see 50 trees and they all different, they have different branches and different types of trees and so on, right? So the universe created them in this way. They are the universe, and the same with humans. Each human with their genetics and with their environment, they have a unique representation of the world and me, and a different idea of like how I should be and how the world should be, and the different drives and motivations. And we can find some similarities, but then also total uniqueness of each human being and in each moment.
Mm. So would you say that a human being is like a bunch of like programs or those filters, and there is like spirit, the light coming through? Like how, who are we?
Yeah, but it's like we are not disconnected from the rest of the universe. The weather outside affects us, the temperature affects us, behavior of other humans. If you have a pet, if you have a friend, if you have people around you, we all like it's all again, it's a single unified system, if you will. It doesn't have separate parts, but then each brain, because it's small and the universe is infinite, then the brain creates all of those imaginary objects like here's me and here's president and here's whatever USA or Canada or Ukraine or whatever, and it kind of manipulates those imaginary objects, but the objects they don't exist outside of their imagination, including me and you and all those concepts.
So
So yeah.
everything is basically that the quantum field of love, right? And we just kind of trying to interpret it.
Yeah, but that love is unconditional, right? And it includes things like cruelty and pain and death and wounds and rape and everything. Everything is part of that, right? And reaction to that as well, right? So in my words, I'm not saying, oh, it's all good, killing and rape and murder is all good. No, like, and then we have our reaction to that. That's also intrinsic part of that as well.
Yeah, yeah. I find that's what's really hard to accept sometimes. That, as you
It's
said, that like
impossible.
this,
Yeah.
yeah.
We cannot like acceptance is this whole infinite loop. Like, can we accept our inability to accept?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, that love and God includes all of what we call like the biggest pain or the biggest unfairness and
Everything, this current moment already includes everything and it's all fully accepted. And, then after this, the brain then constructs a mental model of this and like, oh, it should be this way or whatever. And there is a reaction and action, and then it creates the next moment. So the next moment is born right now, and so on.
mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Okay, now I kind of want to bring this unconditional love and what we were talking about, like decentralized systems and the blockchain kind of. Can you kind of say something about this altogether?
Sure. Yeah, blockchains and decentralized systems and whatnot. Like again, as I already mentioned, right, our brain they're very powerful. They're amazing. It's just an amazing thing that the universe has created in the course of evolution, if you believe in that. Or you can have a story that God created that, but it doesn't matter, right? Nevertheless, it has to be simplified, right? Because if I look outside and I see all of those objects and how do I describe them to you? But I can tell you, hey, I see 27 trees and they have branches, and you have some idea of what I'm talking about, right? So we're talking about simplifications and models. So all of our communication, it's always just like a very simplistic, um, weak picture of what reality is, and that's all that we have. And when we talk about IT systems, like for example, for a long time, the systems they were designed to be very hierarchical, and the idea was like, here's the system, and it will store the data records, and we are smart, we're humans, we developed all of that, the ways to do that, and then there will be some good people who will manage that data in a good way, and so on, right? But then it turns out that we are humans and we make mistakes. And actually, when we store a lot of valuable data in a particular system, then a lot of people would want to hack into this and steal it and change that for their own benefit. And the idea of blockchains and decentralized technologies, it's based on better assumptions. It's like saying, okay, you know what? If we do accept the fact, or we realize that, humans are fallible, humans can make mistakes, humans sometimes can be greedy and scared, and so on. How can we build systems that are based on better assumptions, right? So systems like Bitcoin was the first, and then many others like Ethereum was the second, and many others is uh, if we do realize that people want everything for themselves, they're greedy, they want to take everything, they want to steal it, and so on. How can we build a system built on those assumptions? So it's really about design of our technology that's built on better assumption that we used to do. And I think that it's obvious now that like if I look at the US, right, there are all these assumptions that, here's the system and it elects this president, and this powerful country then have this smart, good guy who will be the leader of the free world. And then when we see those assumptions fall apart, then we're like, oh, maybe we now need to redesign a political system with better assumptions. When we have clarity that corruption happens because, again, people want something for their personal benefit, right? And then quite often people go into politics because it gives them power, it gives them ability to amass benefit for themselves and so on, right? How can we overall think about the world not in the way how it should be, but the way it is? And then design, whether it's technical system or it's a political system, whatever else we're doing from those better assumptions. In relationship, the same, right? Like, like what if we don't say like, well, you should not be ever angry at me, or you should not be jealous, or you should not be doing this. But it's more like, okay, what's the reality? How can we start from what reality is? Again, reality is still our simplification of what it is, but without those shoulds. Like, I really, at some point, the idea of that things should be certain way disappeared from my thinking, and life is now so much easier because it's clearly that it's already the way it is. And it doesn't mean that like I accept it or whatever. There are still preferences and actions on my part, but there's no should.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I like how you explained it, especially with the example of the political situations, because it's often people who, try to be those political leaders, they actually come from very traumatized child inside of them, and that's the way they try
Entrepreneurs, by
to.
the way, it's also the case. I've seen a lot of entrepreneurs very driven by some internal pain and trauma, if you will, and they can be very
Mhm.
successful because it's a very strong force. But subconsciously, they hope that if and I've seen also that progresses and known some people over decades, like, oh, when my business hits $1 million, then I'll be peaceful. Well, doesn't seem to work. Okay, now when it's 5 million or 10 million, 20, it doesn't really happen because human nature is not about is not cannot be simplified in this way.
Yeah, it's like that deep sense of like unworthiness. It comes out as that like arrogance and trying to achieve more things to prove to yourself that you
Of course,
actually
constantly. No,
worthy of
that's such a
something.
good point. That sense of unworthiness, right? Because that's really we are scared to feel that unworthiness and helplessness, and we're constantly trying to convince. We always on the lookout for that, right? And I mentioned that social media post and thread, and it was funny because like people were writing all kinds of responses, and if you're threatened, if you feel that you're unworthy, then you're always like reacting, right? I was just having fun. You know what? Like, I don't believe I have any worth. I am a fucking emptiness, and without that, it's such a more peaceful foundation for everything. But it's like it's kind of impossible for human being to accept their total unworthiness and emptiness, and kind of see that it's also total fullness and total
Hmm.
power because you're the whole universe. You're not a separate thing, and God is you.
Absolutely. That's what we are an ocean and a drop and a drop in the ocean, and that
Yeah.
accepting those this paradox is that what can actually kind of get us out of that constant, you know, war between like this unworthiness or arrogance and like proving yourself. And even in that the blockchain situation, what you explain, it's kind of going beyond that into what I call like higher self, the self that's kind of there is no ego, that knowing your total worth or fullness, that you're just worthy because you exist. That's how I like to see it. Like I am worthy, like I don't need to prove it. And also, I don't need the constant reflection of that worth as well. And that higher self perspective is like that capital S self that just comes with that compassion. It's like holding it all. It can hold your unworthiness and worthiness and arrogance, and like kind of holds it all in it.
Yeah. One big mess. Very lovely.
One big mess. Here we go. That's what. That's what. That's what's gonna conclude a.
Yeah, maybe that should be the title of this episode. One big mess.
One big mess. Like there is no hope for us, but we don't really.
No hope, no purpose, but
No hope, no
still this
purpose, people.
compassion and
So just
everything and
relax. You can just
curiosity.
take this pressure of yourself. Just live
Oh,
the life like.
if you could, right? Like, but when you see that you cannot even take the pressure off yourself, something just disappears. It just disappears. And if it's there, it's there. If there is pressure, if there's pain, right there, that's it.
Mm-hmm. All right. Well, thank you, Dima, for coming to this first podcast. I hope we'll do another one as well. And anything else you maybe want to say, people who listening to us, and yeah, just couple more
It's
words.
great to explore all these different topics. And as I said, I don't believe in advice, but we listen to stuff and stuff affects us and we listen to each other, right? So it's all like constantly changing. So I really have no clue what I'm talking about, but I'm full of ideas and opinions and I'm happy to share them. So hopefully people will be curious to hear our conversation, right?
And I love what you said about curiosity, like how that was always and always is like your kind of, driving force within yourself. And yeah, me too. I definitely resonate with it. All right. Thank you so much.
Bye.
Bye.
Okay.
Oh, wait. Mm.